must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us this afternoon. The show is Diaspora Dispatches. We get to bring you the latest news from the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and we shall start off with news from here in Kenya. And the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has signed into law a new refugee bill that allows asylum seekers easier access to education and opportunities to integrate and earn a living. It comes just 6 months before a planned shutdown by the authorities of 2 camps housing more than 500,000 refugees. The authorities say the camps have been used as breeding grounds for terrorists, blamed for some of the worst attacks on the Kenyan soil. Kenya has been in a protracted struggle with the United Nations Refugee Agency over plans to shut down the Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps that for decades have been home to 500,000 refugees, mainly from Somalia and South Sudan. In September, the president rejected an earlier bill that sought to compel the state to provide housing and social amenities to refugees at special transit centers. And then we go to Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso's President Roch Marc Christian Kabore has admitted to problems that must be corrected in the fight against terrorism after an attack that killed 53 people. The suspected jihadist attack on Sunday, in which 49 soldiers and 4 civilians died, targeted a military police detachment in Inata in the north. He spoke following public anger amid the high death toll in one of the deadliest attacks on defense and security forces in Burkina Faso started facing jihadist threats 6 years ago. 2 commanders have been sacked after hundreds of young people in several cities held demonstrations on Tuesday over the rising insecurity. The protesters called on President Kabore to resign for failing to rein in this insecurity. But the president has called on the people to stand together with the security forces to defend the country. A national mourning period has been declared in Burkina Faso from Tuesday until Thursday in the wake of the latest attacks. And then we head over to Nigeria, and another case of insecurity and gunmen in northwestern Nigeria state of Sokoto have killed at least 21 people in fresh attacks on several villages in Sabon Birni area. Residents told the BBC that the attackers on motorbikes also looted food items and other essentials in the villages. The raid were carried out on Tuesday night, with the village of Sangerewa being the worst hit. The state police spokesperson Sanusi Abubakar confirmed the killings, but said they were still gathering details. The attacks comes as the state governor Aminu Tambuwal announced a rise in the death toll to 43 from a Mandi attack in Ilela town near the Niger border. The authorities initially said 13 people had been shot dead there and 2 others in Goronyo town. Northwestern Nigeria has been grappling with the armed criminal gangs carrying out killings and kidnappings for ransoms. The authorities are being criticized for failing to tackle violence despite the deployment of thousands of security forces and the shutting down of internet and mobile phone services in most of the region. And then we go to Sudan, and doctors in Sudan say 14 people have been shot dead by security forces as thousands took to the streets to protest against the recent military takeover. Activists had called for mass demonstrations to mark the day when a civilian was supposed to assume the leadership of the governing sovereign council. The man who led last month's coup, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, dismissed the government, arrested dozens of politicians and named himself the head of the new sovereign council. There is growing evidence of just how brutal the Sudanese security forces have been. Doctors in the capital Khartoum say tear gas has been fired inside hospital buildings, and soldiers have prevented some of the wounded from being treated. We head over back to Nigeria, and the U.S. has removed Nigeria from the list of religious violators ahead of the visit by the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in the country. The U.S. government last year placed Nigeria on its special watch list of states that have engaged in or tolerated the severe violation of religious freedom. Nigeria is not in the 2021 list, which has Myanmar, China, Eritrea, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Algeria, Comoros, Cuba, and Nicaragua are also on the special list of governments that have violated religious freedoms, according to the United States Department. However, the jihadist group Boko Haram and ISWAP operating in northeast Nigeria are still designated as entities of particular concern. Mr. Blinken is visiting Nigeria today on the second leg of his three-nation trip that includes Kenya and Senegal. He is expected to meet Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari to discuss how both countries can further cooperate on global health, security, expanding energy access, and economic growth. Nigeria is battling a range of security threats, including the long-running Boko Haram insurgency, intercommunal clashes, and more recently, a wave of mass abductions at schools by armed gangs. And then still staying with the West African countries, and West African military chiefs on Wednesday began a three-day summit in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, to discuss the escalating jihadist insurgency in the Sahel region. The senior officers from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, will discuss the ongoing withdrawal of the French Barkhane troops carrying out counter-terrorism efforts in the Sahel, and the African Union's proposal to deploy 3,000 troops to the region. The Ivorian newspaper Fraternite Martin has reported Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have been battling the Islamist militants' insurgency for years. On 10th of November, Togo confirmed the first militant attack on its territory. The three-day summit will assess current operations and reflect on the prospects of improving the security in the ECOWAS zone. The Chiefs of Staff Committee is a support body for ECOWAS that brings together all the chiefs of the armed forces and is responsible for conflict prevention and management in the region. They will visit the Jacques International Academy for Combating Terrorism. Then we head over to Mali, and the French troops on Wednesday officially handed over the farthest northern post in Tasselit to the Malian forces. Paris troops have been occupying the post for the last 8 years as they fight the insurgency from the northern jihadists in the region. The French army has also indicated that it will surrender its Timbuktu post to concentrate farther south in Gao, Menaka, and Gossi. This is the second base the French troops have handed over after it first did the same with the Kidal base in mid-October. In June, Paris began reorganizing its military presence in the fight against jihadists in the Sahel, notably by leaving its northmost bases in Mali, that will be Kidal, Timbuktu, and Tassalit, and planning to reduce its troops in the region by 2023 to 2,500 and 3,000 men, compared with more than 5,000 that are present there today. Relations between Paris and Bamako soared on September 25th when Mali's transitional Prime Minister Chaguel Kokala Maïga accused France, which has been militarily engaged in Mali since 2013, of abandoning it in an insurgency. And the relations further went south when Malian government made some deals with Russian mercenaries to help boost its security. And then we head over to South Sudan. And the SPLM-IO has resolved to send its committee to the training centers across the country to screen its forces and organize them in a military formation next week. The peace faction decision comes as a result of delay by the Joint Defense Force to start screening exercises on time. In September this year, President Salva Kiir directed the Joint Defense Board to screen the 53,000 united forces in the training centers within 4 weeks for graduation to take place. Following the order, the Joint Defense Board constituted a three-joint committee composed of senior military commands from the peace parties last month. They were to be dispatched to the three regions of Greater Bahr el Ghazal, Upper Nile, and Equatoria. But since then, the joint teams have not traveled to the cantonment sites to kickstart the exercise due to financial constraints and logistical challenges. Colonel Lam Paul Gabriel is the spokesperson of SPLM-IO. He blames the delay on the leadership of the National Transitional Committee to avail resources for committees. He now says SPLM-IO has unilaterally decided to screen its forces in a week's time. And then we still stay with South Sudan, and President Salva Kiir has constituted 4 more state legislators and appointed members of parliament to represent the peace parties in several presidential decrees read on state-run television on Wednesday. Kiir reconstituted Eastern Equatoria, Warrap, Jonglei and Northern Bahr el Ghazal state assemblies. In separate decrees, Kiir appointed speakers for the respective states and all their deputies except for Eastern Equatoria. They are Severino Mayra Janus of SPLM-IO for Eastern Equatoria Legislative Assembly, Maper of SPLM-IO as Speaker for Warrap, and deputized by Bona Del of SPLM-IG, and the list continues. And then we end our bulletin this afternoon from Niger. And unidentified gunmen have killed at least 25 people in southwest Niger, officials have confirmed on Wednesday, the latest in a string of deadly raids along the country's border with Mali. Attackers on motorcycles stormed the camp of a local self-defense militia near the village of Bokarat in the Tahua region on Tuesday, as said Atawane Abetane, the mayor of the nearby town of Tilia. Gunfight lasted for several hours before Nigerian security forces arrived and repelled the attackers, he said, and security officials said only one of the defense militia survived. And that is the latest news from the continent of Africa. It's just one bad news after the other, and it appears that there's a lot of turmoil in the West African region, in ECOWAS particularly. So not very good. The insecurity there is bad, and as I've mentioned there earlier, there was a meeting of ECOWAS military chiefs that they've been having from yesterday, and is expected to go for about 3 days, and they're trying to just deliberate and see how better they can improve the security of ECOWAS. It is the first time I'm hearing of this meeting by the military chiefs, and never mind that the issue of insecurity has persisted in the ECOWAS states now for a while. And when you read Niger, and then I had a news from Burkina Faso and Nigeria and Mali, and these other countries, tell me which country does not have an insurgency now in ECOWAS. So these are worrying information. And when you hear like that attack that happened in Burkina Faso just a couple of days ago, I think that now has claimed about 53 people. And of course, yesterday while we were talking, there were protests that had taken place in Ouagadougou, that is the capital city, and residents there were saying, you know what, President, if you cannot President Kabore, if you cannot guarantee us our security, then you have no business, being the president of this country. So they were protesting. And, it's not the first time this number of people, even more, have been killed in Burkina Faso. They're struggling with insurgency. It's Boko Haram, Islamic State, and all these, militant groups that have really laid an assault in this country, the ECOWAS region. But what I like about President Kabore is he was able to listen to what the people were saying, and he admitted that there has been some dysfunction by how those attacks happened that claimed 53 lives, and by how the country perhaps have been handling, their security in the region. And I think that was big of him to come out and say, you know what, there is a failure on the government's part, and perhaps we shall do better. And he was now calling upon the people of, Burkina Faso, the Burkinabes, to come together and work with security forces and see if they can help in quelling and just addressing the situation as far as security is concerned in Burkina Faso, something that perhaps President Muhammadu Buhari could learn. I've not heard, he's come out several times, but admitted to other things, but he did not personally take responsibility and say, you know what, as the president of Nigeria, and my first very important duty is to protect your lives, at least to assure you of that. And I have failed to do that in numerous occasions. We've not seen President President Muhammadu Buhari, coming out and claiming responsibility in that regard. So I think that was big of President Kabore to come out and say, you know what, we have failed, and there has been some dysfunction in how the security operators and my government have been handling this issue of insecurity in Burkina Faso. So I don't know, but when he says that the people should stand together with the security forces, on one hand I do understand what he's trying to say, but on the other hand, what do you want the people to do? Really fight with these insurgents, and they don't have the weapons and all that. So still the backstops with the government, and President Kabore has to understand that he must do better to ensure that the people of Burkina Faso are very well protected, and his government has to do whatever it can, everything it can, to ensure that the insecurity in the country is addressed. Now, that will be nice if Mr. Kabore, the president of Burkina Faso, would, make sure of that. But remember, insurgency is a problem, is a huge problem in the Sahel region, and we know, the mother country that this problem has emanated from, and that is Nigeria. And so if Burkina Faso decides to address that problem, that's wonderful. Niger decides to address that problem, great. Mali and these other countries in ECOWAS. But the bottom line is, if the issue is not addressed from where it really lies, and that is in Nigeria, then these efforts by these other countries might not be of great or will not make such a huge difference, because it has to be addressed in Nigeria first. It is a ripple effect. So if all leadership of ECOWAS could come together and actually make an effort of addressing the issue of insecurity together, then maybe that will make a huge difference to the people in the Sahel regions. I don't know if this meeting by the ECOWAS military chiefs will perhaps effectively address this issue. We shall wait and see if that will happen. And as we speak, another attack happened in Nigeria, and this time in Sokoto State, where 21 people, I think, were killed. And yesterday I had another news where a couple of other, I don't know if I can get that script, nearly the same number of people were killed, and also over the weekend. So this is something that has to be addressed with the urgency that it requires. And as we speak right now, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is in Nigeria. He visited Kenya. Yesterday we held a press conference, addressed the issues, and we know the U.S. and Kenya, we've been great partners when it comes to fighting insurgency in this country, and together, and so with other countries as well. So now he's going to Nigeria in a wake of fresh attacks where people are being killed, others are being abducted. And hopefully he will challenge, the leadership of Nigeria to take the issue of security a bit more seriously, and to really come with ways that are effective in addressing the issue of insecurity. You can't have all these people, all this data, and people dying. 21 people are murdered, 20 people are murdered, 50 people are murdered. These are not just statistics. These are lives that are being cut short. These are lives that shouldn't be lost. If at all the government could just improve on its ways of addressing the issue of insecurity in Nigeria, and also in Nigeria. Also, we saw another attack that claimed 25 people in its border with Mali. And we know what is happening in Mali right now. France, I think sometimes back in June, said that it's planning to scale down the number of troops it has in the Sahel region. And it has about 5,000 troops, and now it is saying that it will cut down. No, in Mali itself. So it says it wants to reduce its troops to from 5,000 to half of that, 2,500 or maybe to 3,000. And that did not sit very well with Mali. Mali felt we are in the middle of, an insurgency, and the country is already so stretched. We don't have enough manpower and sometimes the technology to fight these people, and the weapons that we need, to fight, the insurgency. So Mali felt, why are you leaving us in the middle of, what is happening? But, after the ousting of the president, last year, that, the relationship became a bit frosty with the current leadership in Mali. So, not last year, but this year, Mali, right? Yes, this year. So anyway, So the new regime, the military junta, started having a working cooperation or relationship with Russia, and specifically with the Russian mercenary company that, said it will come in and fill in that gap that France wanted to leave so that it could come and help Mali fight this insurgency. And of course, we saw how France was not very happy, and Germany, of course, was not happy, because also Germany has some troops there, and the UK and other members in the European Union. And so I don't know if the mercenaries are already in Mali, but now France has gone further, and it has moved from one very important and key post in the northern part of Mali, and that is Tessalit, and it has handed over that post back to the Malian forces. And it also did surrender the post it had in Timbuktu, as well as Gao and Menaka and Gosi regions that have been prone to those attacks. So basically Mali now, being left to itself and to its forces, feels it has become very vulnerable. So I think now the Russian mercenaries will just come in full force and, cement their presence there and try to fight this insurgency. But the reason why some partners were complaining, like a country like Germany, was saying, we as European Union and the rest of the countries that we've been in Mali trying to fight and help Mali in fighting this insurgency, we understood our clear goal and vision. And so by Russia coming in, we don't know what Russia is up to. So maybe it does not share the same vision or goal that the rest of us had. So it might place them in a path of disagreement. And that is the last thing you want when you're fighting an insurgency, to realize perhaps one of your partners does not have the same goal or the same intention to that. So that was a bit of a problem with the rest of the countries. So like I said, I don't know if the Russian mercenaries are already there in Mali to help the forces. But if France is pulling out in these very important places, then they will just come in and fill in. And then what? You're going to complain? Okay, so we will see another proxy war being protracted there. And at the end of the day, it will bring a lot of other issues that we see play out in Europe and other places, and that will be transported there in a really very vulnerable situation in Mali. Okay? All right, so let's get into another crisis. It's like crisis after crisis after crisis, from the continent this afternoon. But those are the unfortunate situations and the news that we are dealing with across from east to west, to north, to south, because even in the Horn of Africa, we also having a crisis. Uganda was attacked the other day. Islamic State, claimed responsibility. So as Kenyans, being, very in close proximity with Uganda, we have to be on high alert. Add to the fact that we are still trying to fight Al-Shabaab in the northern part of the country, and now this new conflict in Ethiopia. It's just bad news upon bad news. And now in South Sudan, SPLM-IO has resolved to send its committee to the training centers across the country to screen its forces and organize them in military formation next week. Now, the peace faction decision comes as a result of delay by the Joint Defense Force. Remember, there was a Joint Defense Force, which was one of the requirements of the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. For South Sudan, all the forces from the different parties, SPLM, SPLM-IO, SPLM, whatever, there are so many of them, and the SSPD. I can't say it right, but yes, in opposition, right? So they're all supposed to have a united, force of about 83,000 men and women who will comprise of a strong force and a united army of South Sudan. But that has not been made possible because of a couple of issues that South Sudan has been dealing with. And I think for me, and this is just a personal opinion, maybe it's not true. I think for me, the biggest problem that has made even the Joint Defense Force to not screen and to not have this unified force is the lack of willingness for, I think I've said this so many times, it's a broken record, from the leadership of South Sudan to just make this happen. So soldiers have been, in the cantonment sites. Others have left because the conditions there are really horrible, and they've gone back in the villages and they've formed these militias that we hear are continuing to cause insecurity in the country of South Sudan. So now SPLM-IO, that is in opposition, I think this one is by the first Vice President Riek Machar, they've decided, you know what? Forget the unified forces. We're just going to screen our forces and see if you can get about 53,000 of them in the training centers within 4 weeks, and we'll have them graduate. So what will happen to the other ones? Because the agreement was to have 83,000, and that was a very direct, something that was pointed out and was indicated in the revitalized peace agreement, of 2018. That was one requirement. So if you decide to just screen a section of that forces, what are you doing? It's not going to work. Obviously, these unilateral decisions that are made by either sides of the stakeholders in South Sudan is not serving, the interest, because you will see the other side now coming out and disputing. You will see the other, that might cause another, tussle there in South Sudan. So we'll wait and see what the rest of the stakeholders and the rest of the parties will say about this. And so they're saying they will go ahead and screen the other forces on their part. And this follows the order the Joint Defense Board constituted a three-joint committee composed of senior military commands from the peace parties last month. And of course, they were dispatched in 3 regions, that is Bahr el Ghazal, Upper Nile, and Equatoria. But since then, the joint teams have not traveled to the cantonment site. So they were dispatched 3 weeks ago to go and screen these people, the army who have been in cantonment sites. So 3 weeks later, they have done nothing. And listen to the excuses now. They're saying they don't have the resources. Why are we not having a conversation here where I was telling you about this news item that I think we talked about for over a good amount of time, about the monies that are being lost in South Sudan, about $4 billion US. Nobody can account for other millions of dollars that nobody can account for in South Sudan. And the people who have stolen these monies, they are known. But what President Salva Kiir was saying, going after them and holding them accountable might make them, take up arms and start fighting the government. So you will have people stealing from the government, monies that could have gone, as I was saying here that time you were looking at this story, this money could have helped, with the passing out of the soldiers and having them leave cantonment site and take care of these other logistics now, which the committee is saying they don't have the money. And this National Transitional Committee, sometimes back last year, there was also another scandal where a lot of them, and they live in Juba now, the capital of South Sudan, but a lot of them, while participating in this committee and whatever it is that they've been doing, decided, no, we can't really stay in our homes. We'll be staying in the hotels in Juba. And nearly all of them have homes in Juba. But they decided, how about the government that really does not have even that money? We'll stay in the hotel and the government will pay for. And so there was some tussle because now the hotels are saying, hey, you've been here long enough. There are no payments that are being made. So, you wanted them to leave the hotels, a majority of them. Okay, and they don't have the money, but the money is being looted and the government cannot go after the people who are looting this money. So helping South Sudan is difficult. And I think at this point, there is no that will, from South Sudan itself. So that is unfortunate when you look at, how things are playing out there. So hopefully they'll find a solution for that. That is all we had for you this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Mugutu. Bye-bye for now.
peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.